It's time to talk about your money here on Good Morning Quad Cities. First, let's take a look at how the stock market is starting the new trading week. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are both up nearly 2%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 0.3%. Also up, gas prices, but you and I already know that. What you may not know is that the summer driving season kicks off this Friday, April 1st. Every year, millions of Americans hit the open road for trips and tournaments, and this year it's going to cost a whole lot more to do that. Joining us is our financial expert, Mark Grywacheski from the Quad Cities Investment Group. Good Monday morning, Mark.
And a very good Monday morning to you, Angie. I kind of hate to start this week off on a bit of a sour note, but, unfortunately, we should expect these high gasoline prices, for quite some time. Look, it all comes down to crude oil, which, gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel are derived from. Crude oil is that global commodity, and its price is subject to those global forces of both supply and demand. Now, U.S. crude oil production is far below that record-setting volume we once had a few years back, and that's important, Angie, because that literal flood of crude oil we once produced helped keep those global prices of crude oil low. But now we are much more reliant on both Russia and OPEC to meet our crude oil needs. However, as we've been hearing about on the news, there is that growing ban on Russian crude oil, which further limits that global supply and will most likely drive up prices even higher.
A couple of weeks ago, the price for a gallon of gas set an all-time record high. Where are gas prices at right now, though?
Average for a gallon of regular gas now stands at $4.24, which is just below that all-time high of $4.33, literally set just a couple of weeks ago back on March 11th. Here in the Midwest, Angie, the average cost for a gallon of gas, little bit cheaper at $3.92, but that price varies greatly from one state to the next. Unfortunately, Illinois has the seventh highest average price in the nation at $4.50 a gallon. Here in the Quad Cities, Angie, the price is heavily dependent on which side of the river you fill up on. On the Iowa side of the Quad Cities, the price is $3.94 a gallon. But on the Illinois side, it's 52 cents higher at $4.41 a gallon. And Angie, if you plan on traveling to Chicago, and I know a lot of viewers do, a gallon of regular gas will cost you $4.62 a gallon, and many places are well over that $5 mark.
Yeah, you know more than anyone, right, Mark, because you travel to Chicago. All right, switching gears a little bit now. On Friday, the University of Michigan's monthly Consumer Sentiment Index reported that consumer optimism is at a 10-year low. What's the main cause behind this?
Biggest factor far and away, is behind this declining optimism is inflation, which, we know is at a 40-year high and is expected to kind of creep up a little bit higher, in the upcoming months. These rising prices, especially on those basic necessities, are taking a very heavy toll on household budgets. And as inflation has been, steadily rising over the past 12 months, we see that corresponding decline in the consumer sentiment index.
To what extent do you think this will start to impact consumer spending, which, as we know, is very important to the economy?
It is, and you really kind of hit that on the head there, Angie. Consumer spending is the main driver of the U.S. economy. And in fact, it accounts for 2/3 of our nation's total economic growth. But, look, rising inflation, low consumer optimism are not a good combination. And we continue to hear from Wall Street these additional downgrades for economic growth in 2022. And there is that growing concern that prices simply get so high, Angie, that, that consumer spending literally comes to a grinding halt.
And possibly means a recession on the way. Mark, thank you so much for your expertise and time this morning.